everyone, and welcome to today's SOAR webinar on representing immigrants and non-citizens with the Social Security Administration. Today's webinar is presented by SAMHSA SOAR Technical Assistance Center at Policy Research Associates under contract to the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. My name is Pam Hine, Senior Project Associate here at the TA Center, and I'll be your moderator. Before we officially begin the webinar, I would like to present Kristen Lupfer, Project Director here at the SOAR TA Center, who will give our welcome this afternoon.
Thanks, Pam. Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. We are so pleased to have three esteemed presenters who each have many years of experience providing services to the immigrant community. Many of you know, after each webinar, we ask you to complete an evaluation, which includes a question that asks, what topics would you like covered in a future webinar? And you asked for a webinar addressing representing immigrants, and we are thrilled to finally be holding one on this very important topic. Many challenges that are inherent in assistance, which includes obtaining documentation, accessing appropriate mental health treatment, finding culturally competent services, and identifying appropriate multilingual or translation services. We hope today's webinar helps you better understand Social Security's eligibility requirements of citizenship and residency, and also how to engage and provide appropriate assistance to the immigrant community.
Housekeeping items before we begin. Just a reminder, your lines will be muted throughout the webinar. It's being recorded and will be available for download on the SOAR website in about a week. Right now, you may download the PowerPoint slides. You have two options. First, if you look to the top left of your screen, you will see the word File. Then you want to click Save and then Document to download the materials. Your second option is to visit the SOAR website. The link is provided in the slide. Click Webinar, find today's topic, and the PowerPoint slides are ready to download and print. At the conclusion of the webinar, as Christian mentioned, you'll be directed to a link for an online evaluation. We really do value and appreciate your feedback, and as you can see, use it to improve and inform future SOAR webinars and activities. In fact, this webinar today, as Kristen said, was chosen because of your feedback. So we'll briefly review our learning objectives and for today's webinar. So on this webinar, we hope that by the conclusion you'll understand a little bit better how immigration, refugee, and residency status impacts eligibility for SSA benefits, and also better understand the cultural concepts of mental health and how these differences influence access to treatment and other services. Understand the documentation required by SSA specific to non-citizens, and also tips on how to obtain this evidence, and then learn about some valuable resources out there to assist your efforts when providing immigrant services. So today we are again lucky to have with us Lee Alvear with the Dallas Regional Public Affairs Office as Public Affairs Specialist with the Social Security Administration in Dallas. She'll be speaking to more of the technical aspects of SSA rules regarding citizenship and residency. Sarah Nagay, Special Needs Care Coordinator with the International Rescue Committee in Baltimore, will be discussing some of the mental health and access and issues often faced by the immigrant community. And then we'll be listening to Gerardo Benavides, Disability Assistance Outreach Specialist with the Healthcare for the Homeless in Baltimore, who will talk more about utilizing the SOAR process of the immigrant community. So this brings us to our first poll question. We would like to know whether or not your agency is providing SOAR representation as a part of your overall immigrant services. So we'll just take a minute to find out, indeed, if the agency is providing SOAR representation at this time as part of your overall immigrant services. So please take a minute to fill this out. All right, very much. About a third of you do provide SOAR representation. So hope for the folks that, do not at this time or are unsure, I hope that after this webinar you'll see how you will be in a better position to add this to your array of services. So thank you for participating in this poll. So without further ado, I would like to present Lee Alvear with the Social Security Administration. Lee? Lee, is your phone unmuted?
Oh, it is.
It is unmuted.
The floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you. My fan here. I want to start the presentation with Social Security. I will be covering Social Security disability and disability under the Supplemental Security Income Program. For both Social Security disability and SSI, you meet the definition of disability. Now, our definition by disability is stipulated by Congress, and the definition, the literal definition, is on the screen, which is a medical condition of impairment prevents substantial work for at least 12 months or expected to result in death. We also take into consideration age, education, and work experience. Now, what does that mean? It means whatever your impairment is, we're going to look at it, and will that impairment last at least 12 months? Has to last at least that long or result in death. Now, we're talking about education and work. We will look at what work experience you have. Are you able to continue to do that work or any type of work that would fall, even if it's a lesser type of work? Different qualifications under disability, but basically at least it has to last 12 months, and it doesn't mean you have to wait 12 months since it actually started. It just means from the point that you either had a car accident or whatever the condition is, from that point forward, it is so severe that it keeps you from working. On the slide, it's asking who can get disability. With Social Security, not just with disability, but with retirement as well, and in our other programs, in order for someone to be eligible for Social Security benefits, you do have to work at least 10 years and earn your 40 credits. In order to receive or earn 1 credit in this year, you need to work at least, pay taxes on $1,220, and you get 1 credit. In this year, if you earn $4,880, you get your full 4 credits. So year and you multiply times 10, those are your full 40 credits. That is for any type of benefits. Now, that would mean you are fully insured. That means you work 10 years, you give us you pay your taxes, you're going to get some type of benefits.
Hi. We have a few people emailing that they're having trouble hearing you, and just in the event that it is from your phone, if you are you on your handset or speaker?
My headset. Did I?
Okay, you can take it off your headset. Yeah, you can take it off the headset. That might improve the quality. Thanks.
Is that better?
Much better.
Much better. Thanks.
Oh, that handset. Okay, hold on. All right, so did you hear the other part for Social Security? As long as you've worked your 10 years or earned your 40 credits, you will receive some type of benefits, and predominantly people think of retirement. But for disability, the difference with this program is not only do you have to be fully insured, you have to be currently insured. Currently insured means from whatever point you became disabled or you had that car accident, you had your heart attack, whatever point that happened, we go back 10 years. So last 10 years, have you worked 5 out of those last 10 years? If you have, then you are considered both fully and currently insured. And that's the part that some people miss. If they work sporadically or they retired at 55 and they come in later, we do have to look at 5 out of those last 10 years. Now, the younger workers, you're saying, well, if I'm 24, I'm 27, there's no way I could have worked those 10 years. So we do have special consideration for those that are under the age of 31. anyone who is 24 years old, as long as you've worked 1.5 years and paid your Social Security taxes, then you are considered fully and currently insured. For age 29, if you worked and paid Social Security taxes at least 4 years, you're considered fully and currently insured. Anyone else over the age of 31, well, we do have to look to make sure you've worked your 10 years plus 5 out of the last 10.
Yeah, that's your slide.
Okay. And on the next slide, it says who can get them. Well, not only the person who's applying with Social Security because you've paid into the program. If you are eligible, if you meet our disability eligibility requirements, you meet that definition, then your children who are under 18, if they're still in school, they can receive benefits. If they're still in high school, then they can continue until 19 and 2 months, as long as they are not, right? If they are still in school and they get married, the benefits would stop. The person who is applying, if they're married, their spouse may also receive benefits. Now, the spouse would have to be at least 62 if it were to be based on age, or it could be that sometimes the spouse is not working if they're earning under a certain limit, or they're caring for the minor children. The spouse could, in those cases, receive benefits under the number holder's record as well. This also includes the divorced spouses. For divorced spouses, you have to have been married at least 10 years. From the beginning of marriage to the divorce, there were at least 10 full years in there. Social Security, and I know we have more information, but I'm sure that will probably continue on the next training. For Social Security, you, the person, and your family can receive benefits if they meet those criteria. On the next slide, for supplemental security income, this program is different because it's paid out of general revenue. More stipulations under this program because this isn't something that you've paid into. It is based on need. There is an income and resource limit to receive supplemental security income benefits. Now, in order to qualify, it's a two-part program. Not only do you have to meet the income and resource limits, you also have to be either blind or disabled, that age, or older, and you don't have to be disabled at 65. It's just based on that age or older if you are under our income and resource limits. True if you're a U.S. citizen, if you're a naturalized citizen or permanent resident, and these basic qualifications, then you are eligible to apply for supplemental security income. For non-citizens, there are some special requirements, and they continue on the next slide. For non-citizens, well, first you have to be a citizen or a national of the United States, or a non-citizen who meets the alien eligibility criteria under the 1996 legislation and its amendments. Now, there was a difference before that time, but with the Welfare Reform Act, there were some changes that came into this program. On the next slide, with when is a non-citizen eligible for SSI. Now, and I will start by saying that the next slides are very technical. It's going to depend on whether you were here disabled and eligible before August 22nd of 1996, or if you came into the U.S. and met these requirements after that date. But if this is a lot of information and it is in your slides, I want you to know that when you apply for supplemental security income, we do look at this information more in detail, and we have other pamphlets that we can supplement with this information. But I am going to read the following criteria slowly, and if you have questions at the end, I can go ahead and at the end of the whole two presentations, we can address them at that time. Now, as of August 22nd of 1996, most non-citizens must meet two requirements to be eligible. To be in a qualified alien category, and they must meet a condition that allows qualified aliens to get SSI benefits. All of the other requirements, which is the income and resource limit. And so that you know, the income limit for 2016 for an individual is $733. For a couple, it is $1,100.
for an individual who is applying is $2,000. If they're applying as a couple, it remains at $3,000, and those resource limits have been the same for a while now. The next slide, we're going to define. Okay, so now who is a qualified alien? Well, there are 7 categories of non-citizens who are qualified aliens. And if you are a qualified alien, or you are, if the Department of Homeland Security says you're in one of the following, so for several slides, we're going to cover the 7 categories. The first one is, you must be lawfully admitted for permanent residence, or the LAPR, L-A-P-R, in the U.S., including Amer-Asian immigrant as defined in PL 1-202 with a class of admission AM1, AM8, or conditional entry under Section 203A7 of the Immigration and Nationality Act as before April 1st, 1980. Enrolled into the U.S. under Section 212D5 of the INA for a period of at least 1 year. Or a refugee admitted to the United States under Section 207 of the INA. Or asylum under Section 208 of the INA. That with deportation being withheld under Section 243H of the INA, as in before April 1st, 1997, or removal is being withheld under Section 241B3 of the INA. A Cuban or Haitian entrant under Section 501E of the Refugee Education Assistance Act 1980, status that is to be treated as a Cuban Haitian entrant for S purposes. You have to be deemed qualified alien if under certain circumstances you or your child or your parents have been subject to battery or extreme cruelty by a family member while in the United States. Next slide. Under is a qualified alien eligible for SSI. Now, you are in one of the 7 qualified alien categories aforementioned, or have been determined to be a deemed qualified alien because you've been subject to battery or extreme cruelty, you may be eligible for SSI benefits if you have limited income and resources, aged, blind, or disabled, and also meet one of the following 2 conditions. SSI and lawfully residing in the U.S. on or before August 22nd of 1996. Lawfully admitted for permanent residence, a LAPR, with 40 qualifying quarters of earnings. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to just been your work. It could have been done by your spouse, your parents, the 40 quarters, but only for getting SSI. That's just for this. Someone, either if it's your spouse, either you and your spouse, you worked 5 years, your spouse worked 5, or the parents divided. Someone somewhere in there worked those 10 years. Quarters of earnings earned after December 31st, 1996 if you, your spouse, or your parents worked or received certain benefits from the U.S. government based on limited income and resources during that period. Now, if you entered the U.S. for the first time on or after August 22nd of 1996, you may not be eligible for SSI for the first 5 years as a LAPR, even have the 40 qualifying quarters. That's where that date is very important. You are currently, or if you're currently active in the United States Armed Forces, or you are honorably discharged veteran and your discharge is not because you're an alien, this condition may also apply if you are the spouse, widow, or widower, or dependent child of certain U.S. military personnel. Residing in the United States on August 22nd, 1996, and you are blind or disabled, you may receive SSI for a maximum of 7 years from the date DHS granted you qualified alien status in one of the following categories, and the status was granted within 7 years of filing for SSI. A refugee admitted to the U.S. under Section 207 of the Immigration and Nationality Act, that's INA. An asylee admitted to the U.S. under Section 208 of the INA. An alien whose deportation was withheld under Section 243H of the INA or whose removal is withheld under Section 241B3 of the INA. The Cuban or Haitian entrant as defined under Section 501E of the Refugee Education Assistance Act of 1980, in a status that is to be treated as a Cuban Haitian entrant for SSI purposes. An immigrant pursuant to PL 100-202 with a class admission of AM1 through AM8. You may read 7 years. There is an exception to the August 22nd, in the next slide, August 27, 1996 law for certain non-citizen Indians. The categories who may be eligible for SSI, non-citizens, and are not subject to the August 22nd, 1996 law would include American Indians born in Canada who were admitted to U.S. under Section 289 of the INA, non-citizen members of a federally recognized Indian tribe who fall under Section 4E of the Indian Self-Determination and Education Assistance Act. Now, a lot of information. On the next slide, we're going to continue with additional eligible alien categories. This would include victims of severe forms of human trafficking. You may be eligible under certain circumstances. If the Department of Health and Human Services or the Office of Refugee Resettlement and the Department of Homeland Security determine that you meet the requirements for the Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000. Afghan special immigrants, you may also qualify for SSI for a period of 7 years if you're an Iraqi or Afghani special immigrant admitted to the United States. Just to be eligible to meet the requirements for SSI, on the next slide we're saying, well, what is residency? You have to be living within the United States or the 50 states and areas. You have to live in the U.S., the Northern Mariana Islands, with the intent to continue living within the geographic limits, or living with a parent in the military service assigned to permanent duty ashore anywhere outside of the U.S., or be temporarily abroad for the purpose of conducting studies as part of an educational program. That is a continuous stay in the U.S. or in those requirements. In order to determine if you meet any of this criteria, on our next slide, we do need certain documentation, and these are originals or copies. We do not accept photocopies. This would include a certified copy of your birth certificate, which shows you're born in the U.S. Of course, this is for natural citizens, for born citizens. A certified copy of a religious record for your birth or baptism recorded in the U.S. within 3 months of your birth. Have, of course, your naturalization certificate. Have your U.S. passport. Citizenship, naturalization. Identification card for use of resident citizens in the United States. That would be the I-197, or an identification card for use of resident aliens in the United States by both or naturalization of parents. That's Form I-179. For all this information, and sometimes we're aware that for our older generation it may be more difficult for them to obtain these documents. So on the next slide, if you can't provide this information, then we may find you to be a citizen or a national of the United States. If you explain why you can't have that information, use the information you have, which shows that you were living here and you are a citizen or national of the U.S., to show your date and place of birth here in the U.S., that you are otherwise known to be a citizen or national of the United States, to you and the citizenship of any person through whom you obtain citizenship. Has been, I know, a lot of information to obtain, and thankfully you do have the slides. There are some other pamphlets that I'll send Pam afterwards for if you do receive benefits, the first part being Social Security disability, we can send payments outside of the U.S. For additional SSA resources on the next slide, it will send you directly to our public website, which is www.ssa.gov/people/immigrants. So our publication of Supplemental Security Income for Non-Citizens, it can be found on our website, www.ssa.gov/PUBS/PN-05-11051. The SSI Spotlight, or the Benefits for Aliens, is also on our public website that does have the information that's been in this PowerPoint, as long as other publications that are available to you. To know if you have worked, because you're like, well, okay, you're saying I need 40 credits. How do I know if my work history is correct? Do I have those credits? Do I not? On our next slide, we offer you information on how to create a My Social Security account. With My Social Security, it gives you direct access to your earnings record. It will tell you what years we have earnings for you. It'll also tell you, are you insured, are you not insured? It takes your age into consideration for those that are under 31. Or if you are above, it'll tell you you have 29, you have 31, whatever your credits are. Social Security, or for www.socialsecurity.gov/my-account. Also, when you go to our public website, it's one of the main icons right there on the front page. Once you press the icon that looks like right on the slide, the My Social Security, it's what you need on the next slide. In order to create an account, you do have to be at least 18 years or older. Valid email address, a number, and a U.S. mailing address. Those are the only 4 things you need in order to create an account. Next slide, it'll show you there are 4 steps to creating the account. The first one is, of course, to open up the link on our website. The step is to as soon as you read the requirements, you go right to the bottom of the page and press Create an Account. It will ask you to verify some of the information, and is what you should already know. Your name, your address. This is encrypted, meaning that the questions that you're going to come across are related to your Experian credit report. So if you're wondering how we know what your passwords are, or when you purchased a house, it'll say, Lee, you purchased the house in 2008. Did you pay cash or did you finance it through one of these agencies? And you select the correct one. There are several questions that you will go through. If you are not familiar with your credit report, or you forget a certain account and you get an answer wrong, it'll tell you you're suspended. You can try again in 24 hours, or you can just go right on in. Visit one of our field offices, because you just can't remember the information. If you provide valid government ID, a driver's license, a passport, etc., we can help you set up an account face-to-face. More information on social media, which is the next slide. We are on Facebook, all these other accounts. And effective on the last slide, on May 3rd, we do have a version of for our smartphone users. You can get a lot of information. For those of us that are attached, have our phone at the hip, that information on our public website can be obtained there. Pam?
Lee, thanks so much for your great presentation and letting everyone know, all the participants, about myssa.gov. I know it's really important for everyone to really enroll in that and to share that with other SOAR providers and SOAR applicants. It's a great resource. So thanks again. We have plenty of time for questions at the end. We want to set up our second poll just to see if you've been listening to Lee. This question is, all non-citizens can receive disability benefits, true or false? So we'll take a minute to answer that. If you're for participating. The vast majority of you said that was false. We do know that, which is the correct answer. We know that non-citizens can indeed receive SSI benefits. depending on the category. So thank you for taking the time to take that poll. We're going to hand the mic over to Sarah Nagy to talk a little bit about mental health issues in the immigrant community. Sarah?
Hi. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Okay. Let me just introduce myself really quickly. I work at the International Rescue Committee in Baltimore, Maryland, and I serve as the Special Needs Care Coordinator. So program, we do intensive medical care coordination for refugees who have either physical disabilities, mental illness, complex diseases, and we help them advocate in the hospitals. We help them try to find the right providers for them so that they can sort of be in charge of their health care when they arrive in the United States. For our agency, we work with Baltimore Systems. They're one of the health providers here in Baltimore, so all of our refugees generally have the same primary care provider. Baltimore City Community College, they're a great resource. They have English classes for a lot of our clients, and we have somebody from the Department of Social Services who helps clients and benefits when they arrive in the country, when they arrive in the United States. Who is a refugee? Refugees their home countries to well-founded fear of persecution. There's a variety of reasons that people may be refugees. Some of those reasons would be race, nationality, political opinion, religion, or group that they are from. Defined by the United Nations, the refugee is a person who is owing to a well-founded fear of being persecuted for reasons of race, religion, nationality, membership of a particular social group, or political opinion, is outside of the country of his nationality and is unable to, owing to such a fear, is unwilling to avail himself to the protection of that country. So it's somebody who's not safe in the country and has to leave the country out of fear of safety. Which are creating refugees. These are coming from areas of Asia, Africa, and Europe, but as you can see here, they're refugees from all over. And refugees are legally admitted into the United States, welcomed into the country. The difference, if you've met asylees, the difference between refugees and asylees is asylees are people who are persecuted, but they come to the United States on their own method and their own way to the United States. And once they're in the United States, they seek asylum and ask permission from the United States if they can stay here legally for fear of returning to their home country. Fleeing, as we mentioned before, like this, there's different things to consider. Why is a refugee? What situation made them leave their home country? And did it take to leave the country? During this time, when they're fleeing, this is the period that's most associated with post-traumatic stress disorder. Refugees flee. Regulations refugee nationalities resettled in the past fiscal year were from Burma, which is also, you might know it as Myanmar, Congo, Eritrea, Sudan, and Afghanistan. And they're immigrants from other populations. After the Refugees Free, the International Rescue Committee, we have offices all around the country. So this isn't just the one in Baltimore, but we help refugees and other humanitarian immigrants become self-sufficient and integrated in communities across Maryland and strengthen the social and economic health of Baltimore City. Baltimore's really lucky. We have a very vibrant rescue population. They're business owners. They control, and it's really sort of amazing to see like how people after a few years here are able to prosper. In Baltimore, we've helped almost 10,000 refugees and asylees since 1999. So their health journey before they arrive in the United States, when they're overseas, in the refugee camps or in another country, they go through a medical screening. And we receive before their arrival biodata, which is generally a sort of brief description of ailments that they might have. Oftentimes, this is very vague. It may refer to a mental illness, or it may refer to some sort of physical disability, and say, like, give a time period for when follow-up is needed. But generally, this information is not very specific, and it's not maybe the variety of problems. So refugees will have a health assessment at their private provider within 30 to 90 days of arrival. So that's the first time that they see a doctor, and the doctor might make referrals for them to see other specialists. They Medicaid as soon as they arrive, but generally the Medicaid is approved approximately 4 weeks after their arrival into the United States. And they have Medicaid coverage for 8 months after arrival. After that 8 months, they're expected to recertify at their local DSS office. These medical screening that they receive before they arrive, they do get a complete medical review and a physical exam, and this generally includes a mental health evaluation and HIV and STD screening for clients 15 years and older. When they arrive in the United States, that's when we receive that information. So we don't have that information before their arrival, but when they bring that with them when they arrive. Health concerns and risk factors among the refugee population: forced displacement, extensive traumatic experiences during conflicts and while living in camps. This includes torture, violence, physical sexual abuse, and domestic violence, lack of access to primary and dental health care. That's why you'll see a lot of times, too, you see a lot of mental health is within this population because they have been through so much trauma, and the trauma has been so severe that it is pretty common occurrence. Other risk factors are severe and chronic malnutrition and vitamin deficiencies, substantial mental health burden, and limited basic health and education services. there's a new set of medical concerns that sort of arise here in the United States. Some of the biggest concerns would be our complicated healthcare and insurance systems, limited preventative healthcare coverage, especially with adults as far as dental and vision. There's no for maybe the dental work they might need. So the new environment that includes being an environment where you don't speak English, trying to communicate your needs in English, to make sure your family's taken care of, and trying to make sure that they act while addressing all the needs for yourself and for your family. And lack of cultural responsiveness among providers. I'll try to go into this a little bit later. More mental health issues. I don't have to be confused with mental illness. It's just as I think mental health a lot of times is tied to trauma, and so it have a lot of stress factors that they have to deal with. So I do see mental health as sort of a common issue that comes up. They have higher rates of depression, anxiety problems, including post-traumatic stress disorder. In some cases, like with PTSD, their rates are 10 times higher than the rate of the average population. And torture has been estimated in between 5 and 35%, depending on what population that you're with. Range that experience torture. Is often cited as the biggest stressor. A lot, I think, when they come to America, things will sort of resolve themselves, or they'll get the medical care they need. They find it much more difficult once they do arrive. The language barrier is key because they don't feel in control a lot of times of being able to sort of navigate their needs on their own. Financial resources to take care of themselves or to take care of their families. There's so many different aspects that add together once you arrive in the United States, and to navigate all of that is extremely stressful. Many of refugees are in a second country before they arrive in the United States, and so a lot of them live in refugee camps. Refugee camps are often in bad conditions, and they're there for years upon years waiting to the United States. And there's also a lot of violence that takes place in refugee camps, so it's covered with the violence, not just in one country, but when you're during this where you're in a second country trying to get the refugee status. So that's another stressor that exists. I think we sort of hit on all of these, but these are the different. So these are the different aspects that stress for people resettling. So the fleeing, the or exile from their country, and the process of resettlement. So it's just very overwhelming trying to navigate that together. lot of clients might be very apprehensive about seeking mental health treatment, and it's important to be cognizant of what that means. Behind client populations, the countries, they probably have a different experience with the mental health system. Psychiatric hospitals or the oppressive use of the hospital system, the medical system in their country, confidentiality might not be exist with the one in the United States. And there are also different repercussions within the community of having a mental health issue. There will admit that there's a problem or there's an issue, to be more apprehensive about any kind of stress or depression that they're dealing with. Experience with effective treatment and may be more apprehensive about trying to seek that treatment. A lot of times, for me, I'm talking to clients, and I see that the mental health issues present, approach them in a way that, that asks them, like, it sounds like you're having a very difficult time. I know that you're under a lot of stress. Many refugees feel this way. There's not anything wrong with you. It doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you. And I often might shape it as a stress issue, and being under a lot of stress and the stresses of resettlement, and offering, like, can you refer you to this person that you might be able to talk to about these stressful issues. And generally are pretty receptive to that if you sort of just like frame it as just like having somebody to talk to, and framing it as a stress and not as like mental health. As many of you who do work with immigrant populations, one of the biggest problems and obstacles is language access. Language barriers are problematic mental health. So the mental health diagnosis and treatment relies on direct communication with the client. You see, like, when you're with someone in your own language, a lot are able to pick up on the nuances of a person's saying something or how a person's behaving, and you can feel when something might not be exactly right. Those social cues are a lot more difficult to pick up on when you and the client aren't speaking the same language. I'll do this a little bit later too, but with interpreters, sometimes there might not be an in-person interpreter available. If you're using somebody over the phone who isn't on the same cues, and they're just trying to make sense of what the client is saying. So reframing the client's words in a way that makes sense to them. And, for that reason, if it is a conversation that I know mental health is involved, I might say to the interpreter beforehand that it's really important to make sure that you what the client says. We need to know exactly what the client's saying as they're saying it. And while populations may seek help for mental health problems from primary care providers, mental health problems are likely to go unnoticed. And this is the same point that I just made in the first one. I think we miss social cues when we're not speaking the same language, or when there's somebody in the middle who's interpreting for us. So, like, might go by before you really realize the severity of somebody's mental health issues. Language barriers, also particularly difficult for primary care providers to meet the patient's mental health needs. And a lot with as like providing the proper interpretation for counseling or providing or to serve because of barrier. And I'm going to go into the next slide for this reason. The Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. This is something really important. It comes up constantly in our work. That receives federal funding is obligated to provide an interpreter at no cost to those who cannot communicate effectively in English. This efforts to provide the correct interpreter in the correct language. In my working here, have had hospitals asking for us to bring our own interpreter to the event, and if the agency is receiving any federal funding, they do not require a non-English speaker to bring their own interpreter. Working with interpreters, interpreters are probably the most invaluable set to working with our clients, but oftentimes working with interpreters, you still may run across the cultural bias. If the problem individual is facing within the community, the interpreter may sometimes transfer his opinions on the situation in the way he or she interprets. This sometimes will cause interpreters to offer unsolicited advice to the client that may not be understood by the caseworker or the provider. Hopefully this will never be the case. This happens, but this